My guest today is a good friend, somebody that we hit it off just the first day we met. Both share this kind of sometimes annoying high level of energy and positivity, and we both kind of have this entrepreneurial spirit and go-getter, just nose to the grindstone work ethic. But before I introduce her, I want to share a very quick quote. This one hit home with me. I don't know if it'll resonate with everyone, but it's about truth. And the quote is, "Truth is not about what, but who. Truth is not something objective and static, a thing to be known and studied from a distance. No, truth is essentially personal. It's a personal disclosure of the character of the person. Understood in this way, truth is a way of living, a mode of existence, a relational truth." I think the journey and exploration into other people's whys and having a why correlates directly with that quote about truth and living a truth and having a truth and how that becomes such an integral part of your day-to-day routine. My guest today is Caroline Ritenour. Caroline is a good friend. We've been friends for, I want to say 6 years, somewhere in that range right now. And the entire time that we've been friends, she has been an entrepreneur and has kind of embodied the mindset of an entrepreneur. And her career is so specific and centric to helping kids, young adults, learn how to swim who learn differently, who may not learn using the traditional methods of learning how to swim. When I asked her how long she had been swimming instructor or involved in swimming, she said, "I can't remember a time when I wasn't swimming." So it's going back to age 15 as a career as a lifeguard all the way to today, still highly involved in the pool, but more on an educational level as opposed to supervisory. I'll let her kind of go into some of her other entrepreneurial paths that she's taking. She's married to a wonderful another entrepreneur, and they've been married for 2 years. And a lot of our conversations have been around reading. Both of us are avid readers, around piano. Now, I haven't played piano for quite some time, but I played for 15 years, and so it still holds a very strong place in my heart, and I listen to the piano every single day. She plays and practices to this day. First, Caroline, thanks very much for taking time to be here today. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm trying to
So when you are going through your day, before I get into your why, understanding that you have the different entrepreneurial things that you're involved in, and with your husband, who is also an entrepreneur, it has to be a challenge for you to kind of partition your brain off. And I think we're going to get to that. I don't know this because I don't let anybody talk about their why before we start the actual recording.
Sure.
But something tells me that as a result of these different compartments that you have and different trajectories that you're going down with the entrepreneurial paths you're on, that you're probably going to have multiple whys, maybe. So we'll get into that. Let's talk about that, actually. Let's go right in and talk about you sharing with us your why.
Yeah. So I should probably kind of start with what I do first, because I have kind of multiple hats that I put on. My primary business that I do, I work with individuals who learn differently, so special needs, different types of learners, and teach them how to swim. So specifically highly trained for nonverbal autistic kids, things like that. I have special training and have built a pretty nice career around that. I've been a swimmer my whole life. I went from barely being able to swim across the pool, and I have video proof now of this. It's pretty awful, to being a state level and collegiate level athlete, and even a master's national qualifier. So, it's that process, right? Like that grind and that process that kind of is in there, I think, because of the sport. And then coached for I don't know how many years, built a swim club in my hometown, did that for 10 years. And then through that work, found out I was really good with special needs kids and transitioned into that full time 2 years ago this summer. And it's been some of the best space I've ever been in, especially in regards to aquatics. And that work, I've been an aquatics director, lifeguard, all that stuff. And then I co-own a meal prep company with my husband. He's a chef. And so we're about a year and a half old, and we just moved into our own space in December. So multiple irons in the fire there. And then I also work with an adoption agency in the Akron Canton area, because I decided to make an adoption plan almost a decade ago now. So I got pregnant unplanned, not with my husband, with a different person, and decided that I did not want to be a parent still, and made an adoption plan and have a wonderful open adoption with my daughter, who just turned 8. And I'm supposed to go visit in a couple weeks, but I'm hoping I still get to go. So I do that work. I help other women who've made adoption plans post-placement after their adoption plans, and help them heal and grow and build community there too. So.
Yeah, and I think that those three things, I thanks for addressing that, because that's an important setup to understanding your why, and I wouldn't have done as good of a job going through those as you did. So thank you for that, and share with us now that we have that proper setup of your employment, what your why is.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this for weeks, right? And I really think it boils down to like if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be a learner, right? Like you have to know how to go out and find the information you need. And the way my brain works, I have diagnosed with ADHD almost 2 years ago now too, which apparently was not a surprise to some people, but it's still a surprise to me, because I'm also a gifted learner. So I just didn't know my brain worked way differently than other people's. And so being a learner, and having that ADHD giftedness, like my brain works like a Rubik's Cube all the time. It's always moving puzzle pieces around, and it's 3-dimensional, and then there's new colors added when I learn new information. So I think for me, a lot of that being a learner and being an information gatherer translates in multiple skill sets, and being able to put that like into cohesive plans and seeing a vision like 5 years down the road, and being able to work that Rubik's Cube and figure out how to make that happen. For me, I think that is probably how that why translates. Like that's the base, right? Like I just like to build and create things and shape things in different ways. I like to find holes where things don't exist, and find things and fill them. Those kind of things, and I built my career, both aquatics careers that I've had at club and the swim lessons, I built from a hole. There was nothing there, and I was like, I could do something here, and I just figured out how to do it. And I think I was talking earlier about that swim background, and that grind, and the putting the process in, and the doing the work to get where you want to go, and having that vision. I think that's where that kind of comes from. And that's just kind of, my battery's running low. I think that's where that comes from, and why I'm always so driven and motivated, right? It's that I think my why is really like the work. Like I like the work, and I think that's a very non-traditional answer, but I like to work, and I enjoy working way more than most people, and it kind of makes me weird. And I know that, but that for me, there's a couple of them, right? Like it just depends on what arena I'm in, where the work takes me, and the core why of my heart. But I like to work.
You have been fortunate enough to enter a career path that energizes you, mm-hmm. and that fulfills you physically and emotionally and mentally, and similar to what I do for a living, it's very people oriented. So every single person you're interacting with changes the dynamic of your job. While the job itself may be very routine, the people that you're interacting with make it different and make it more interactive and yeah, I don't think it's as untraditional as you would think it is to be passionate about your work. But I heard a few different words, so I want to make sure that I'm dissecting this right. So it was about the learning and growth, and then dissecting the learning into action.
Sure.
And then taking that action and making it your work, making it your passion.
Yeah, that's a really good way to summarize it. Mm-hmm.
So how does that learning, executing work, it sounds like this could be one why universally applied to all of your different entrepreneurial paths that you're on, or is it different for your assistance with birth moms?
So like with birth moms, for me, you know, I'm a teacher, my degree's in education, and I think part of that, like not all birth moms have a lot of great resources, and I have good resources, and I wanted to use that space to help educate others and how to heal. Like I'll go out and find the information, but not everybody else is wired that way. So I'm able to find the information, and a lot of the stuff I'm teaching when I'm facilitating retreats is stuff that I've had to figure out on my own. And then I would say like a huge growth thing for me at 20, I wouldn't have wanted to share that information at all, right? Like I did the work, I've done that work, that's my work. And now I want to share that work, and I want it to grow, and I want it to succeed. And it has a different vibe and it has a different feel. It's definitely like, it's fulfilling because I'm giving, but I'm also putting something in a space that's really difficult to navigate, you know, that challenge of it. And being able to use that path to educate even people that are not birth moms about what it's really like to be a birth mom, and to be that voice, and to use those things for me. Like it's always, I think almost always the point of education, and caring, right? Like I care very deeply. The one thing I've always said about my birth mom friends and like our retreats, that's the one space I can always be 100% myself without judgment. And the fact that I've helped create that space that these women can be in and literally just be themselves. And nobody judges you for that. And they all care and love it. Like that doesn't exist in a lot of places. It's very special. And had I not made this adoption plan, right, like this traumatic thing that kind of happened to me, and made that plan, I wouldn't have that sense of self and truth, right? You're talking about earlier, truth. And being able to like stand in that like authenticity of who I am, because that gave me that space to really take that first step in there too. It's always a growth mindset for me, I think, is really what it comes down to. It's always growing and learning, and now it's sharing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It's interesting to me how so many people that I've talked to have come out of adversity of one way, shape, or form, whether it's poverty, whether it's socioeconomic challenges, whether it's being a single parent, or it's something else that is made them have to overcome. And by overcoming, they've gained the knowledge and the strength to be able to share with other people who may be going through the same thing, how they can overcome. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one key component, the adversity piece, but then it's also that sharing of knowledge, right? If I think of Nicole Ruth, who went down the path of using real estate as a tool for multi-generational wealth for herself, and then teaching her son, and then going, oh, wait, I actually know how to do this, and I can teach people this. And it's not adversity related. It's getting to a point where you feel qualified, where you feel like you have the knowledge and the wherewithal to be able to share, because there's nobody that comes along and just gives you a stamp that says you're qualified, right? You can now do this. It's something that happens inside. I guess the quote is more appropriate even now, where it's your inner truth, right? When that inner truth arrives, you can then say, okay, I'm willing to go and put myself out there and share what may or may not be traumatic, challenging stories about myself to create engagement and relatability with other people Very quick story I want to share. When I was in my 20s, 20 was a really rough year for me. Not a teenager, not 21, kind of in this in-between ground. And I was floundering with life at that point. And one thing that helped me dramatically at that time was just sitting down and talking to another guy who was 20 and realizing that he was going through the same thing I was. And that commiseration, maybe that's not the right word, that relatability, that understanding that I'm not alone was so helpful for me. And I can only imagine how the relatability piece where you can go to them and say, I was here, I've been through it, let's talk about it. It has to be impactful for them.
For sure. And we've even started in the retreats lately, saying that like, we didn't get here, like we didn't just have a baby and this is how we are. Like this is years of work, and retreats and, even me going to my own retreats outside of the ones I do and learning and growing and doing the work that's necessary to grow. And that's where, like, even for me, like we were talking about the why, it's like, it's the work. It comes down to the work. The work.
But the work comes from studying, right? You hit on that. You can't just go and do the work without learning and educating yourself.
Yeah, reasons for working and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of, for me, it's definitely like the work. And like, I know with swimming, right? Like, I've always wanted to give kids that opportunity to be in the water, right? And like now I'm in this group of kids where I've taught some of them to swim, and now they're doing this group called Swim Squad, and they're in an interaction. It's like herding wet cats, right? I've got 7 different kids with all different special needs and behavior challenges, 45 minutes of herding wet cats, but they're in a group, they're functioning together, they're doing a skill that they've learned, and that like, is my safe space has always been the pool. It's quiet and under the water. It's less of magic just in general with water, but, and then I'm watching them, and after like 6 weeks, they figured out how to, like, they're still parallel playing, but like they're jumping in, they're going to the ladder, they're getting out, they're getting back in line. And like, that is all happening. And like, not without me, but without that catalyst of what I'm putting into the world in that space, they wouldn't have that opportunity. And like, now I've created that opportunity for them to have, and to love the water just as much as I do. And a lot of those kids love the water probably more than I do. And they would be in the water all day, all the time, because I see that in the summer, right? Like, you don't go and get out of the pool. And so, I'm providing that space for them to be safe and learn and grow, and, and like, hopefully down the road, they'll be able to pass it on too somehow.
But that's the fulfillment, right? I don't even have to ask you about the fulfillment, right? Because
right?
your why.
When that kid finally nails that thing you've been working on for 6 months, and they like finally put their face in the water, or I have those kids that I have like some kids with water trauma, and they are so terrified of the water, they scream for months. And then now, like, I have a girl, it's almost 2 years now, and she's swimming and she loves it. And she loves, the first thing she does is go under. It took us almost a year for that to happen. And now she's a fish. And now she's like discovered this joy, and there's this other world that exists. And like, that's what makes, that's what really makes me, like, my heart happy. When you see them like fall in love with the water, right? Like that, they fall in love too.
Yeah, it's energizing, right? That's one thing. Vince Pacente, who wrote The Ant and the Elephant, said when we were just discussing the why, said that it's that thing that energizes you, the thing that nothing else compares to the way it makes you feel. And I don't know that the energizing happens necessarily always at the fulfillment, right? Because you have a definitive fulfillment with every single person that you're engaging with in the pool or on the birth retreats, right? Where I think some people in their why, they don't have that daily or by interaction fulfillment. So their energizing piece of the why may be the why itself, may be how it impacts their day and their decisions and their moral compass, as opposed to the fulfillment piece. And it's interesting to hear that there is a definitive fulfillment piece with you, and I can hear and feel the energy come off of you when you talk about that fulfillment piece. You struggled with this idea of your why. Do you think that in you? Yeah. So, and I know we've talked about it leading up to us having this podcast. So do you think in your thinking and your discovery of this, if you could share any hardship or any challenges that you faced as a result of your struggle through this that may help another person discover their why?
Sure. So honestly, I tried not to think about it too much. I've been thinking about it for weeks, but I've tried to not overanalyze it and kind of let this conversation just happen. Because I've worked a lot in the past 7 years about being authentic and genuine. So I think I decided to kind of use this as one of those like vulnerability, Brene Brown kind of experiments, and just let myself talk without thinking too much, and figured the truth will come out. Like I'll probably listen to this podcast like 5 or 6 times and then be able to actually narrow down my why from here. So
there's something to be taken from that though, because that's another coming out of what Vince and I talked about, the author of The Ant and the Elephant. He said, we discussed how there's just certain concepts that if you try to nose to the grindstone them and try to hammer down with a pen and paper and cue it, you'll never get as good of an answer as you will if you just throw it on your subconscious mind and let it marinate for a little bit. And in the midst of doing that, an answer, the universe, whatever you believe, will provide you with an answer. And that answer will be better articulated than it would have been if you hashed it out on a piece of paper with a pen. And it'll be more clear to you than it would have been if you had put a pen and paper and hashed it out with it, right? So it's very interesting that you say that, right? Because I'm a firm believer in doing the same thing. I just throw some things on my subconscious. It'll work itself out. It'll happen organically in conversation when I'm faced with the situation at hand.
Yeah. So even with all of those things, that perfectionism and letting go of that perfectionism is part of that growth way with the authenticity and vulnerability stuff. And so being able to be on something like this and let it be imperfect and just be what it is that day, so for me, sometimes things like this are those things, and that's still a growth thing for me, right? And that's still part of my why. It's that growth and learning new things and trying new things, right? Like if I had planned this out, that would be the typical way I would have handled it, right? With bullet point notes and post-its and things like that. And so trying it a different way, right? This is kind of a low risk opportunity to give myself permission to wing it almost, right? Like I've thought about it, but not really prepare and just let it be in the moment. And instead of being so worried about it being perfect and present it to the world, and just enjoy the process of doing this too, right? This is still learning for me. This is new. This is growing. That's still part of my fulfillment, right? That piece of that right there. Was an experiment today for myself. I had fun. And
that's true of everybody. I think most people have gone through a period where their why is we compare that why to having a moral compass or having an anchor or something that kind of grounds you as you go through your day and the decisions that you're making. But I think at the same point in time, the articulation of it and coming out, you may know it here, but the ability to come out and say it in words that other people can understand, like you said, you could beat your head against it forever, and you may not have that perfect way of describing it, but organically in the midst of a conversation, you're able to arrive at, okay, here we are. Well, thanks so much for taking your time and for sharing and being vulnerable, and for the exploration, right? Because I know just in our conversations, it was a little bit of a challenge. And I know I wanted people to hear who are listening to this, that we've had so many people whose why is this very well articulated, clear-cut, definitive thing, that it's nice to hear you come and say, I know it, I have it, but I had a struggle with putting it into words. And you did it, right? Here we are. We just in the midst of a conversation, we were able to nail it and hit a home run. And it's so cool. Thank you for
sharing.
Should
have read all my panic texts to you.
Right. Leading up to this, right? The day of. Nice. Appreciate you. Appreciate our friendship.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. See you soon.